Emerging Threats Hub, NATO's pivot, Taiwan's lawfare, and the cartels war the new front lines of global conflict.
What if the most significant restructuring of the Western alliance system since the end of the Cold War is happening right now, hidden in plain sight? And what if the rules we thought governed global security, the idea that states act purely out of survival, or that crime and war are separate worlds, are being rewritten before our eyes? I'm Sebastian, and this is Emerging Threats Hub. Today, we are stepping back from the daily noise to look at the architecture of a changing world. We'll explore the United States' fundamental shift in NATO strategy, a brutal tactical paradox in Ukraine that is costing over 1,000 lives a day, and a silent legal war being waged against Taiwan. We'll also go under the radar to look at a domestic threat that blurs the line between organized crime and insurgency. This isn't just about conflict. It's about how shared ideas, identities, laws, and norms are being deconstructed and rebuilt. As always, we're looking for the pathways to stability in an unstable time. Let's begin.
The Great Decoupling, NATO's transformation.
Our first beat takes us to the heart of the transatlantic alliance. For decades, the assumption, dare I say, the social construct of NATO was clear. The United States provides the sword and the shield, and Europe provides the economic muscle and the diplomatic soft power. It was a division of labor rooted in the post-World War II reality. But that reality is shifting. Recently, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby delivered remarks at the NATO Defense Ministerial that flew under many radars. He outlined a fundamental pivot in U.S. strategic thinking. The message was stark. Europe must assume primary responsibility for its own conventional defense. The United States is handing over NATO commands to European officers. On the surface, this looks like standard burden-sharing rhetoric, but viewed through a constructivist lens, it's much more. It represents a potential change in the very identity of the alliance. For 70 years, European security was inseparable from American strategic interests. Now, Washington is signaling that while the nuclear umbrella remains for now, as NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg noted, no one is arguing to replace it. The conventional defense of Europe is becoming a European responsibility. Why does this matter? Because identities in international politics are not fixed. If Europe begins to see itself not just as a collective economic bloc, but as a standalone military power, the nature of the European Union changes. We saw a glimpse of this when European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called for an independent Europe with a strong mutual defense clause. But here is the tension. Realists might tell you this is just a correction of power imbalances. I would argue it's a test of whether the European idea is strong enough to sustain a military identity. Can Europe construct a defense industrial base capable of deterring a peer adversary without the United States? The signals are mixed. European defense industries are in the dark over how to use 150 billion euros in EU loans. Joint projects like the FCAS fighter jet are fraying, with Germany suggesting the world won't end if the project fails. The solution here is not panic, but clarity. Europe faces a choice: construct a new identity of strategic autonomy, or risk a security vacuum. The diplomatic pathway requires Europe to move beyond the comfort of the American security guarantee and build a defense architecture that matches its economic weight. It's a moment of truth for the European project.
Ukraine, the Dispersion Paradox.
Moving to active conflict, the war in Ukraine has entered its 5th year, and what we are seeing on the battlefield offers a grim lesson in the changing nature of warfare. There is a concept gaining traction among analysts called the Dispersion Paradox. It is a tactical reality that challenges the standard assumptions of military advantage. Here is the dynamic. Russian forces, facing the omnipresence of Ukrainian drones and precision artillery, have adapted. They have dispersed. They operate in smaller units, Use thermal camouflage and stay hidden. In theory, this should save lives. It is sound survival tactics. But here is the paradox. This dispersion creates a coordinated assault, a combined arms attack. You need concentration. You need mass. When you disperse to survive, you lose the ability to strike effectively. Yet, Russian casualties remain staggeringly high, estimated at around 1,200 soldiers per day. Why? Because the pressure to attack driven by political objectives, not military ones, forces these dispersed units into uncoordinated piecemeal assaults. They survive the journey to the front line, only to be decimated in fragmented attacks. This is a human tragedy of the highest order. It is a war of attrition where tactics have evolved, but the carnage has not stopped. From a stability perspective, this creates a frozen conflict dynamic. Estonia's intelligence services suggest Russia could face recruitment problems, yet they keep coming. Ukraine is innovating, opening arms export centers across Europe to fund its defense, showing a remarkable adaptation of its defense industry. But the solution remains diplomatic. The tragedy of the Dispersion Paradox is that neither side can currently deliver a decisive military blow without prohibitive cost. Off-ramps are needed, but they require acknowledging the reality on the ground, a reality shaped by drones, attrition, and the stubborn refusal of political leaders to accept the limits of military power.
Taiwan, lawfare before warfare.
If you look east to the Taiwan Strait, you might expect to see stories of naval blockades or missile tests, and those exist. But there is a quieter, equally potent front: lawfare. Beijing is advancing an army of lawyers. This is not a metaphor. China is escalating a campaign of legal warfare, using detentions and simulated criminal proceedings against Taiwanese officials and citizens. The goal is to construct a legal reality where Taiwan is not a sovereign entity, but a jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China. This is constructivism in its most aggressive form. International politics is often about defining the terms of the debate. If Beijing can successfully establish a legal framework that treats Taiwan's leaders as separatists subject to Chinese criminal law, they erode Taiwan's international personality without firing a shot. We often focus on the kinetic, the missiles, the amphibious landing drills. But the law is a weapon. A recent congressional hearing titled "Lies, Lawfare, and Leverage" highlighted this. It is gaslighting on a geopolitical scale. And there is a stark warning coming from those who have seen war firsthand. Taiwanese veterans returning from Ukraine are warning that Taiwan is not ready for war with China. They cite gaps in training and preparation. The lesson here is that deterrence isn't just about hardware. It's about legal resilience. The solution for Taiwan and its partners is to reinforce the island's legal standing and democratic legitimacy in international institutions. You cannot defeat lawfare solely with fighter jets. You defeat it with strong norms and international law.
The new insurgency, Mexican cartels.
Now, I want to turn your attention to a threat that challenges our traditional definitions of warfare. It is not happening in the South China Sea or the plains of Eastern Europe. It is happening on the US-Mexico border. We are seeing a qualitative shift in the behavior of Mexican cartels. An investigation has revealed that cartels are overpowering police with ammunition manufactured for the US. Military. How does .50 caliber ammunition made for the US Army end up in the hands of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel? This isn't just smuggling anymore. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel has authorized attacks on US Border Patrol agents. They are deploying drones, not just for surveillance, but potentially for kinetic strikes. The US is testing counter-drone lasers in response. This moves the cartels from the category of criminal organizations to something closer to violent non-state actors, or even insurgents. They are engaging in near-peer military tactics. They are contesting the state's monopoly on violence, a core principle of statehood. Realism struggles to explain this because states are supposed to be the main actors, but constructivism helps us understand the blurring lines. The identity of these groups has changed. They are no longer just profit seekers. They are political and military contenders in their own right, challenging state sovereignty. The solution requires a shift in mindset. We cannot treat this solely as a law enforcement problem. It requires a holistic approach, disrupting the flow of weapons, certainly, but also addressing the governance vacuums in Mexico that allow these groups to function as state-like entities. Stability requires building state capacity, not just building walls.
Under the radar.
And now, time to go under the radar. This week, I want to draw your attention to a story that sounds like science fiction, but is a present danger: weaponized connected cars. Experts in the European Union are urging action over the risks posed by internet-connected vehicles. Modern cars are essentially computers on wheels. They collect vast amounts of data location, camera feeds, voice recordings. Why does this matter? Because the supply chain for this technology is global. There are concerns that adversarial states could exploit the software in these vehicles for espionage, or in a worst-case scenario, disrupt transportation networks remotely. We have already seen warnings about Chinese-made drones and telecommunications equipment. The car in your driveway could be the next frontier in hybrid warfare. It is a vulnerability hidden in plain sight, integrated into our daily lives. The solution? We need robust cybersecurity standards for critical infrastructure, and that must include consumer vehicles. It's about establishing norms for data security in the Internet of Things before a crisis forces our hand. So, where does this leave us? We have looked at a NATO alliance questioning its own structure, a war in Ukraine defined by a tactical paradox, a legal war for Taiwan's identity, and cartels that are beginning to look like armies. The connective tissue here is change. The international system is not a static chessboard where the rules are set in stone. It is a dynamic social space. Alliances can shift. Laws can be weaponized. Criminals can become combatants. The realist might look at this and see inevitable conflict and competition. I look at this and see the consequence of choices. Choices made by leaders, by institutions, and by us, the informed citizens. The path to stability lies in recognizing that these threats are constructed by human decisions, and they can be mitigated by better ones. Europe can choose to build a cohesive defense. Taiwan can choose to fortify its legal standing. The United States can choose to treat border security as a governance challenge, not just a policing one. We are not powerless. The architecture of stability is something we build, brick by brick, idea by idea. Thank you for listening to Emerging Threats Hub. I am Sebastian. You can find us on social media at Emerging Threats Hub. Stay vigilant and stay informed.